It didn't begin with anything obvious, nothing dramatic or alarming, no sudden loss or misplaced object, no drawers left open or things overturned. Instead, it began with the faint sense that something was just slightly off, that the pen he always kept at a perfect diagonal beside the notepad now lay at a marginally different angle, barely perceptible, almost laughably minor. Or that the stack of post-it notes he always aligned flush with the desk's edge now hovered just far enough from the border to make him pause without knowing why, and though he told himself again and again that he was overthinking, that memory is unreliable and light and shadow play tricks on perception, the sensation persisted, quiet but insistent, that the things on his desk were never quite where he left them, not dramatically shifted, not stolen or damaged or moved far enough to warrant certainty, but always slightly adjusted, just enough to suggest not carelessness, but intention. At first he tried to dismiss it, clinging to the comfort of plausible explanations, blaming his own absent-mindedness or the casual nudges of a passing sleeve or the settling of objects on a slightly uneven surface, and for a time that sufficed, until the moments began to multiply, and he found himself returning to the room after only a few minutes away and noticing that the coaster beneath his mug was rotated a few degrees clockwise, or that the small ceramic dish where he kept stray coins had shifted closer to the corner, not by inches, but by enough that it could no longer be attributed to vibration or gravity or chance, and what unnerved him most was not the change itself, but the precision of it, the consistency with which each adjustment seemed designed not to disrupt, but to test the boundaries of his attention. He began experimenting, not compulsively, not like someone unraveling into obsession, but carefully, deliberately, treating it as a quiet challenge whose rules had been defined by something he could not see, placing items with exact alignment, memorizing the pattern of grain on the wood where a particular pen lay, using faint pencil marks on the underside of objects to track their movement without relying on memory alone. And always, without exception, no matter how subtle the preparation or how brief his absence, he would return to find evidence of deviation, so slight as to feel almost intimate, as if whatever was behind it wanted not to be caught, but to be acknowledged. No one else had a key, no cleaner, no pet, no visitors. The room was private, controlled, secure, and yet the objects within it behaved as if subject to a second presence, one that did not occupy space in the traditional sense, but which expressed itself through proximity, through minute spatial defiance, as though something watched not the objects themselves, but the exact manner in which he watched them. As though the entire surface of his desk had become a conversation, one that did not speak in words, but in tiny, intentional disturbances, designed not to frighten him, but to see if he was paying attention. And once he was, He realized he could no longer look at anything on that desk without wondering whether it was still his arrangement, or someone else's idea of where things should be, and whether the difference between the two was now the only thing that mattered. He stopped thinking of the objects as passive things, stopped treating the desk as a static surface, and began, without entirely realizing it, to think of the space in terms of interaction, as though each item, no matter how small or mundane, had become part of a quiet and deliberate exchange, and the more closely he watched, the more attentive he became, the more certain it felt that something was watching back, not through eyes or movement, but through the slow choreography of altered positions, as though every adjustment was a kind of sentence, every shifted angle a phrase, every gentle rotation a question, and his attention, precise, restrained, increasingly reverent, was no longer just observation, but response. He began to test the pattern with greater care, not in desperation or paranoia, but in something closer to reverence, placing a single paperclip in the center of the desk, alone, unaccompanied, under bright even light, taking a photograph from above, then stepping away for an hour and returning to find it slightly bent, not in a way that suggested damage or force, but with the sort of asymmetry one might expect from use. Except he hadn't touched it, and the desk bore no signs of weight or pressure, and when he tried again the next day with a different object, a pen cap balanced upright on its end, it had fallen not to one side but had been carefully laid flat, parallel to the grain of the wood, as if someone had noticed the instability and corrected it, not in malice, not in curiosity, but as an act of silent participation.